All right, it's 7:05 and let's get started. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Ted Kai and I am the co-founder of Momentum Learning, where we have helped students in the past 7 years to excel in science, math, computer, and other subjects. I see now more than 300 students or parents have already joined. I am very impressed. I wouldn't imagine so many people joining on a Friday night instead of going to a movie, instead of having a nice dinner, instead of hanging out with your friends. You are coming here to spend a time with me and Jarvis. So thank you for being here. I first met Jarvis about, I think, 8 years ago when he was in fourth grade. He was a little boy. Time flew. Now, 8 years later, he got accepted by Wharton and Yale, and he will be going to Yale for his undergrad study. He's turning out to be a fine young man. When he was younger, he started with math. He did pretty well in middle school. He participated in math counts in the AMC series. Later on, he qualified for the JMO as well as AMO. And also in middle school, I think his interests kind of diversified and he started doing debate. Later on, he started doing coding and many different things. In high school, he went to a local private school, which is called Strict Jesuit, where I think they have a very good team of debaters. They have very good coach. So he really excelled in the debate field, even though he did really well in other areas. With debate, he becomes one of the best ones in the country related to LD, which is Lincoln Douglas. It's one of the formats for debate, which he will be discussing a little bit more. In high school, also, he expanded his interest in STEM and started doing coding and eventually qualified for the USACO Platinum division, which is not very easy. So Jarvis, I have gathered some of the questions which I passed to you a few days ago. Many of the students and parents are kind of interested in how did you get started in debate very specifically, and how did you juggle between all these different things, because you did so well, not only in debate but also in math and coding and other things. So how did you spend your time? How did you like, what did you do in the summer and during the semester, in the fall and in the spring? How did you divide your time so you can actually do multiple things and be good at it? So that's something I think a lot of us are kind of interested. Before you start, I want to mention it to everybody that now I have everybody muted. Jarvis gonna spend probably between 35 to 40 minutes talking about his material. During that time, probably a lot of the questions will be answered. If you have any additional questions, please just hold your questions until he finishes his talk. Then we'll have a Q&A session where he's gonna take the questions from everybody and answer the questions. Without further ado, Jarvis, please take over and start introducing yourself.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to everyone for having me today. I'm Jarvis. I recently graduated from Strake Jesuit, and I will be attending Yale and studying math and economics this fall. So I would say that my main three activities that I did in high school were debate, math, and computer science. Debate and math, I both started in middle school, but computer science I started later on in high school. But out of these three, I'd say that I was mostly involved in debate. That debate took up probably most of my time. So today I just want to generally talk about kind of what my experience in debate is, what I think is important for any student to excel in debate at the top level. So first I want to start off with why I learned debate. For things like math and computer science, I think it's a bit more obvious why you should learn it. But I've seen a lot of parents take a look at debate and kind of brush it off as something that is useless. I think it's actually the complete opposite. I think that I've just produced kind of a quick list of just a bunch of different skills that debate can help with, just from simple communication to also very quick thinking or critical thinking, the ability to present something very well, the ability to manage your time, and the ability to do research. I would say that additionally, debate is something that can help distinguish yourself from other people, especially for something like college applications. There's a stereotype that Asian students are very involved in STEM, being skilled in debate and having knowledge about not only STEM, but also about politics, economics, philosophy, all of these skills and subjects that you learn in debate, I think is something that is very useful in distinguishing yourself and showing that you have a wide array of skills that is not just STEM oriented, but rather life oriented and also humanities oriented. So Lincoln Douglas debate actually originates from a series of debates in 1858 between Abraham Lincoln, who most of you probably know, and also Stephen Douglas. They had a series of 7 debates leading up to the Illinois Senate election. And then modeling off of these one-on-one debates, the National Speech and Debate Association decided to form the new high school debate event known as Lincoln Douglas debate. So the rules are typically as follows. There's a resolution that the 2 debaters will have in debate over. The debate is between 1 affirmative debater and 1 negative debater. Each debater gets 4 minutes of preparation time in the middle of the round, and also 3 minutes of cross-examination time where they're able to ask each other questions. And finally, the speech times will follow a 6-3, 7-3, 4-6-3 pattern. So the affirmative will speak for 6 minutes. Then the negative will ask the affirmative debater questions for 3 minutes. Then the negative debater will speak for 7 minutes. Then the affirmative debater will ask the negative debater questions for 3 minutes, and then 4, and then 6, and then finally 3. So in addition to Lincoln Douglas debate, there are also 2 other debate events. One is public forum, and the other is policy. And both of these are 2-on-2 team debates. So Lincoln Douglas is the only individual debate event. I did see questions about people asking, how do I know which debate event is best for me? I would say that typically, usually if Lincoln Douglas fits you, public forum or policy would also fit you because they're very similar events, but you should also kind of get an idea of, do you want to be on a team? And policy typically would require the most work. So I think that's also something to consider. So I want to sort of talk about what the different circuits there are in Lincoln Douglas debate. And what I mean by circuits is basically conglomerates of tournaments. There's different organizations that host tournaments, and then these will basically combine into circuits. So there's 3 different circuits that students can compete in. The first is a local circuit, which is also known as the TFA state circuit. Essentially, students would compete at local tournaments and earn 12 state points by reaching elimination rounds to qualify to compete at the TFA state tournament. So for an example, since I live in Sugar Land, an example of a local tournament for me would be the Dulles High School Invitational. If I get very far at the Dulles High School Invitational, I may earn state points. And then based on the state points that I earn, I may qualify to compete at the TFA state tournaments. And then there, I would try to get to late elimination rounds, and that would be an award that I have reached in debate. The second would be the Nsda National Circuit. This one is, I would say, much smaller in terms of the number of tournaments you would compete at. They basically only have 2 tournaments a year. First is the Nsda District Tournament, which is held around several districts in the United States. There's several districts in the Houston area alone. So if you are able to reach late elimination rounds at the Nsda District Tournament, which in my district would be the top 3 at the tournament, you would be able to qualify and then compete at the Nsda Nationals Tournament, which is actually happening right now. And then finally is the Tournament of Champions circuit. Basically, what the goal of this is to do is to reach late elimination rounds at various national tournaments to earn 2 bids to qualify to compete at the Tournament of Champions. I would say that students who are very active in this circuit probably go to around 10 TOC tournaments a year. Essentially, the ability to earn 2 bids is extremely difficult. I believe about only 80 students qualify every year to the Tournament of Champions. And for that reason, it is largely considered the most prestigious debate tournament in the nation. So an example of this would be the Harvard National Forensics Tournament, which offers 16 bids to the Tournament of Champions. Another one is the Strake Jesuit Tournament, which is actually the Tournament of Champions tournament that is hosted by my school. So tournaments like these will give bids out to students based on how far they reach at the tournament, and then earning 2 bids will give you a spot to compete at the Tournament of Champions. So for most debaters, qualifying and performing well at the Tournament of Champions is basically the end goal of the debate season. It is what they're working towards. So I want to talk about some drawbacks of participating in debate. And these are by no means reasons why you shouldn't do debate, but just things that you need to consider going into debate ahead of time. And I know something that a lot of students wish they knew ahead of time going into debate. So sort of the sad truth about Lincoln Douglas debate is that in high school, there will be a significant majority of students who start debate and then they end up either quitting or they're not nearly invested in the activity as when they started. So this can be due to a variety of factors. The first is an unsupportive school team. So I know one school, for example, is Clemens High School, which doesn't have the strongest team. This isn't because there aren't motivated students, but rather because the coach at Clemens High School will oftentimes restrict what tournaments students are and are not able to go to. That is an example of a school team sort of being unsupportive and restricting the opportunities that students have to pursue debate. The second could be a lack of funding. Just something about debate is that typically it is going to be very expensive. As opposed to things like math or computer science, which usually cost little to no money, debate, you would often have to travel on the weekends, travel to different cities, potentially even different states just to go to tournaments. A lot of times schools don't necessarily cover that funding, which means that there has to be funding on your own. Oftentimes, if you do not have that funding, it may be difficult to compete in debate at a national level, although there are sometimes scholarships given out by tournaments or schools to help cover that funding. And finally, the third thing I'd say is poor time management. Debate is something that you have to invest significant enough time in if you want to be good at the activity, which means that people that are not able to juggle a lot of things, like for example, schoolwork and then other extracurriculars as well as debate, often would fall behind and then would not find the results that they want to, and then become demotivated to do debate as a result. So debate is definitely something that is valuable, but it requires significant investment. So these three things are something that's definitely important to consider. If you want to go into debate, you need to have these three things figured out and make sure that you're able to succeed ahead of time rather than find out in the middle of it that maybe you weren't as prepared for debate as you thought you were. So with that being said, there are several resources that are available to help combat those three problems and also help you excel even beyond those. The first is the high school LD debate wiki. And I've attached all these links in this slide page. So the high school LD debate wiki is essentially a website where everyone that competes on the Tournament of Champions circuit, on that website, they will put every position, every case that they have ever read in a round. At least I get say 99% of any argument, any case, any evidence that they read in a round. So just by visiting that website and then going to a certain school, going to a certain debater, you can see what arguments that they have read. And then by going through that, you can then find resources for yourself. So I'd say that one of the biggest misconceptions about debate is that you have to spend hours yourself writing your own arguments, writing your own cases. That is not true at all. In fact, there are a lot of debaters that never write their own arguments simply because things like the wiki exists. So just by going on this wiki, you can take arguments that other successful debaters have read and then read them for your own. This is something that is very commonly practiced within LD debate, something that is seen as accepted, which makes the LD wiki an extremely valuable resource. Another one is the OpenEv wiki. This is also similar to the high school LD debate wiki, except it spans several years, and also it expands outside of events. So it goes into events such as policy or public forum. And in the OpenEv wiki, you can basically find evidence for almost any argument that you would ever need. So basically in debate, there is a huge norm of sharing evidence, sharing arguments, and then those two wikis are extremely helpful in saving time and saving resources in terms of finding arguments that you want to read. Another thing is a forensics Discord. So I'm sure the students know what Discord is, but the parents might not. Discord is basically a social media platform where just kids can communicate with each other. The forensics Discord is specifically a Discord server where just basically kids who do LD and also other events come together and they can just talk about anything. So if you ever need any help, you could always just send a message in the forensics Discord and there's probably someone that's willing to help you. If you ever have any questions about debate, if you ever want to have a practice round with another debater, oftentimes you will be able to find that in the forensics Discord. So basically it's just thousands of people who do LD together in one social media server. And there's also coaches, there are judges, students, etc. So you'll be able to find basically an answer to any question that you have in that Discord. Another similar social media page is the High School LD Debate Facebook page. This one is a bit more formal than the forensics Discord. I'd say that what is most useful about this is finding out about tournament dates and also finding potential people who want to help coach you or do drills with you. So usually any coach that wants to find students will be in that page, and they'll make a post advertising themselves, in which case going to that page, you could help maybe find a coach that you think would be a good fit for you or could help get you better. The next thing I'd want to talk about is the summer debate camps. So there are a ton of debate camps. Usually these last around 2 to 3 weeks over the summer. And basically every day, with the exception of maybe one day a week, is just drilling. So you'd probably work on debate at these camps for maybe like 8 to 10 hours a day, maybe even more if you go to optional lessons there. And then totaled up, the number of hours that you're working at that debate camp is probably close to the number of hours you'd be working a year just by working with a coach or just by working with a team. But it is completely compressed into a few weeks, which makes it extremely helpful because then you retain all the information at a much better pace. Personally, I found myself going to a summer debate camp and then going into it as a very inexperienced debater and coming out of it as someone who could compete at the top level. I put the debate camps in the order that I would recommend them. The first is the National Symposium for Debate, or NSD for short. They have several sessions. Their main session is in Minnesota, but they also have sessions in Philadelphia and Houston. And I'll actually be teaching at the Minnesota and the Philadelphia sessions this summer. The next is the Texas Debate Collective. The reason why I put the Texas Debate Collective as second is because the quality of instruction, while not as good as NSD, is still extremely high, but it's also much better in terms of affordability because as opposed to NSD, who charges probably $4,000 for 3 weeks, TDC will only charge $1,800 for 2 weeks. And also half of their students are offered scholarships, in which case it is likely that you would be paying less than $1,800. So that would be a 2-week camp in Austin. The next is the Debate Intensive, or TDI for short, and then Victory Briefs Institute. Those 2 camps, while not as great, are still exceptional in terms of instruction, and they would be great options. So those 4 summer debate camps are something that you should definitely look out for, especially if you want to go to debate camp next summer. The next thing is YouTube rounds and lessons. I would say that one of the best ways to get better at debate is to sort of just get instruction and also to watch rounds between top debaters. I entered a few YouTube channels. One is Debate Drills, one is Victory Briefs. These YouTube channels typically have lessons on just general strategy and general content in Lincoln Douglas debate. And they also have tons and tons of rounds between some of the best debaters in the nation. I think, like, for example, if you go on YouTube, you could find a round, I think, of me in the finals of TFA State from this year. So there will be tons and tons of rounds of top debaters debating on YouTube. And just by watching those rounds and trying to understand what goes on, you will typically be able to better mimic or better imitate these top debaters in terms of like what makes them so good. The next thing is Tabroom, or tabroom.com for short. Basically what Tabroom is it just lets you see every tournament that is happening. So every tournament, whether it be on the local circuit, whether it be on the national circuit or the TOC circuit, et cetera, it will show you literally every tournament that is happening. You have to use Tabroom for registration. So basically it will show you what tournaments offer bids or not. It will allow you to register for them, tell you what judging fees you need to pay, tell you what entry fees you need to pay, et cetera, et cetera. That is basically where all the information regarding tournaments is stored. So basically you kind of have to use Tabroom, but it's also a very good tool in terms of keeping up with what tournaments are happening or on what weekends. And then finally, the last two resources I want to talk about is your team and yourself. So with your team, it's extremely important that if you have teammates, you can make each other better by practicing together. And practicing together could mean a lot of things. It could be like redoing speeches. It could be like giving drills on certain skills that you all need to get better at. You would also share cases. And I think that this is extremely important because I've come across a lot of teams where teammates will just refuse to share their cases with each other for absolutely no reason. And then overall, it would negatively affect everyone's performance. Sharing cases is extremely important. And the team that I come from, actually, which is Strike Jesuit, has been ranked #1 in the nation for the past 2 years and was ranked #2 in the nation in 2019. And I think that part of the reason that our team is ranked so high, even though we only have one coach to maybe help 10 to 15 debaters every tournament, is because we work together and we share our cases and we all read the same thing. And we make sure that the things we read are of extremely high quality. So I think that the ability to synchronize well with your team and do these things together is extremely helpful. Same thing goes with helping each other before rounds. If one person has an off round, they can help their teammates before their round, especially if they sort of need to read something that they're not very sure about. Having a teammate there to help is something that is extremely beneficial and overall helping the entire team succeed. And then as for yourself, I think that at the end of the day, there's basically two things that you really need in order to become a good debater. The first is research. It's extremely important that you do your own research. And this doesn't mean that you have to research all of your own arguments and write all of your own arguments. That's not what it is. It means that when a topic comes out or when a resolution comes out, you're doing your own research in order to better understand it. Because then that will lead to you better understanding the arguments you read and then better understanding the arguments your opponent reads. Basically, the ability to do research and just spend maybe a few hours a week just like reading articles is something that actually like will go a long way in terms of your knowledge in the round. Another thing is just practice. So this could mean a lot of things. In debate, it's extremely common to maybe like hire a private coach, especially if your school does not have a great debate coach. You could hire a private coach to do drills with you based on what you kind of struggle with. You could also do drills by yourself and just kind of have a general idea of what you need to get better at. You can do drills with other debaters that aren't necessarily on your team, but are just your friends. And that goes back to all these social medias, like their forensics Discord, where you can just find people that you want to practice with. Basically, just practicing is extremely important. Like you cannot get better without practicing. And I would say that just what makes someone better is just the general experience, the general just having a ton of practice rounds and actual rounds under your belt. Just that experience will naturally make you better, especially if you know what you need to improve on. So when I was looking at the questions that were submitted by the students and parents, there were a few very specific questions that I thought I would cover here. The first were, when should students start learning debate? Personally, I started learning debate in I think the 6th grade, but that is by no means necessary. And I say this especially because when I started learning debate in 6th grade, it was very different. Sorry. Yeah, it was very different than actual high school debate. In Houston, we have this Chinese school called Huasha Chinese School, where there's debate lessons for anyone that wants to do it. The things that we were taught and the things that we learned while on the team were much different than what actual high school debate was like. And for that reason, in high school, I actually had to unlearn some things and learn new habits and get rid of some bad habits. So basically, learning debate in middle school is not always advantageous. In fact, the TOC champion this year and the TOC champion last year, I know both started debate in 9th grade. So when you start debate has no impact on how successful you can be. People can start debate in 9th grade. I know people that have started debate in 10th grade and 11th grade. and I've still found success in debate. So for that reason, it really does not matter when you start debate. I would say that generally, it would be better to start debate in 9th grade though, if not sooner, but you just want to make sure that you're learning the correct things. The next question is, how many hours a week did I spend doing debate? So I would say between my sophomore and junior year, it was about an hour of practice after school every day. And then on average, maybe like an hour of drilling, maybe like half an hour to an hour of drilling a day on average. And that totals up to maybe like 10 hours a week of just pure practice. But then something else that you would also have to consider is that you also have to allocate time towards tournaments. Tournaments can be maybe Friday to Sunday. It could be Saturday to Monday. It could be out of the state, in which case you would have to skip school, take a flight, and then you have to also take into account what are the classes I missed, what is the what is the work that I need to make up. So at the end of the day, tournaments, I would say, are probably the most significant time investment because it's literally days on end being taken up out of your schedule. So I guess on average, like maybe with tournaments accounted for, maybe I would spend like 30 to 40 hours a week doing debate. Of course, there's always free time between rounds doing debate. And I would say that that is something that maybe you could like sneak in a little bit work for, but I would say that debate is definitely a very significant time investment. One of the main benefits I would say though, about doing debate is that it's one of the most fun activities that you could do as an extracurricular. So speaking just from my personal experience, math is not like necessarily a fun activity. Like sure, the math itself is kind of fun, but at the end of the day, you're really going to like maybe like a few math tournaments a year, not nearly as much as you really go to for debate. And then you're taking the AMC at your school, you're taking the Amy at your school, right? None of these are extremely interactive or necessarily fun, but in debate, there's a very vast community, and you meet these people at tournaments. You meet these people. At camps. There's tons of opportunities to just meet new people with similar interests as you. And not only that, you also get to basically explore the nation, where you get to go to tons of different cities. That sort of helps keep you motivated to continue to do well. So for example, my team, when we went to Iowa for a tournament, after the tournament, we just spent a few hours doing a corn maze and going to an apple orchard and picking apples. And that was probably one of the most fun experiences in my life, even though it was just Iowa. And a lot of times there will not be many opportunities to travel, especially for a lot of schools or for a lot of students who lack the funding to do so. But just those small opportunities is what I would say is something extremely fun about doing debate, even though it does take up a lot of time. The third question is, how do you decide which debate event fits you best? So I kind of brushed on this earlier. I would say that they're very similar in nature, but I would say that if you're a team person, maybe PF or policy would fit you better. If you want to invest basically your entire high school into debate, I would say policy is probably best. And that's just because policy is, the rounds are 2 hours each. It requires tons and tons of research, much more research than for LD. And it's probably the one that you need to invest the most time in. If you're interested in philosophy specifically, then LD is probably the best for you, because out of the 3 debate events, LD is probably the only event that has philosophy in it. And then the last thing I'll say is a lot of PF rounds would have more traditional judges, more parent judges, which means that you would have to fit in a lot more persuasion rather than sort of like the nitty gritty of the arguments. So if you don't like the, I guess, overall kind of worse judging of PF, then you'd probably be better off in LD or policy. But overall, though, I'd say that if you're young, it would definitely be fine for you to just maybe try PF at one tournament, maybe try policy at one tournament, see what fits you. because at the end of the day, the skills you learn in policy, they will be able to carry over into LD. There are tons of people who do LD and then cross over into policy, maybe their junior or senior year. There are also tons of people who cross over into LD from policy. And all of these people will still find success because the debate events are so similar that the skills are all translatable. I personally chose LD. I actually did PF in 6th grade, and I made the decision to switch. Originally, it was just a logistic issue. The reason I switched into LD was because at the middle school national tournament, they no longer accepted PF teams where the 2 debaters were not from the same school, and there wasn't really anyone at my school who wanted to be who wanted to be my PF partner. So for that reason, I switched into LD. But I ended up really liking LD just because it was an individual activity. I would say that I kind of worked better alone, and I just generally liked learning about philosophy as well, which is why I decided to stick to LD. For my school, Strake Jesuit, we don't offer policy debate. We only offer PF and LD. And I did not think that I personally enjoyed PF because it was sort of it was more slow paced as compared to LD. And also, I would say generally had less content involved. The next question is, how do you adapt to different judges? That is a good question because judge adaptation is one of the most important skills that you generally need in debate. Typically, especially for those 3 circuits that I mentioned prior, there are tons of different judges that you need to learn to adapt to. I'd say like the first type of judge is probably the parent judge. This is when a student who is debating has an obligation to the tournament to bring a judge. And since typically higher judges may be at better schools or may cost more, they just bring their parent to judge. So typically when you have a parent judging you around who doesn't really know anything about debate, what you want to do first and foremost is to slow down. LD is an event where people speak very fast, especially at the highest levels, in which case you would want to slow down for the judge, very clearly explain arguments, not really deal with the nitty gritty of the arguments, or I guess like what we like to say is the line by line. You don't want to be thinking about responding to every single argument your opponent makes, but rather you want to be focusing on the big picture. What is the biggest reason, the most important reason that you want this judge to vote for you? Then there's judges who are similar to parent judges, but are sort of more experienced. They understand like very traditional debate, in which case you still want to slow down and you still want to focus on the big picture, but you can be a little bit more argumentative. You can be, you could give explanations as to why your evidence is superior to your opponent's, or why certain arguments take each other out, et cetera, et cetera. And then you'll have the higher level judges, in which case you can really just do whatever they want because they are experienced enough to make an extremely adept decision. In which case you just want to do the best debating that you possibly could. Next question is, what do you do if your school doesn't have a debate team? This is a pretty big roadblock, but it's by no means a reason why you can't do debate. And I say this because there's actually the person who won, the person who got second place at the 2018 Tournament of Champions was the only debater from his school. His school did not have a debate team, and he was a sophomore when he won the tournament. If you're a sophomore and you're the only debater of your team and you can get to second place at the TOC, it means that really anything is achievable even if you don't have a debate team. I would say there's a couple things you could try to do. Personally, this is not something that I have experience with, but speaking to people who are independent debaters from their schools, the first thing you could do is you can try to make a debate team. This isn't always possible, but if you have classmates who are interested in debate, or there are other people in your grade that are interested in doing debate, it's possible to just make a club and go to tournaments together. And this would be pretty convenient in terms of splitting fees, sharing hotel rooms, going to tournaments together, carpooling, things like that. It would just make life a lot easier having other people to just make a small team to kind of do debate with. If that is not a possibility, then the only real possibility is kind of doing debate as an independent debater. So what this entails is you sort of need permission from school principal or maybe a school administrator, something like that, to just kind of try to convince them to let you, go to places, go to other tournaments, to just go do debate by yourself, maybe under the supervision of a parent, something like that. Then you would have to maybe find your own private coach, someone who could help you, or maybe find kind of like a lot of people from other schools who are maybe also having the same problem as you, just a group of people that you could work with. I know that there's one private coach. His name is Elmer Yang. He recently graduated from UT, so he will not be doing coaching anymore, but he had maybe 20 independent debaters working with him. He would maybe charge them $200 a topic, to basically have, write arguments for them, do drilling with them, et cetera, et cetera. Finding a coach like that, finding maybe a group of debaters who have the same problem of not having a school with a debate team, would go very far in terms of, just having people that you can work with, having people that can help you improve. And the last thing you want to do is you want to just go to tournaments that allow independent registration. So this is most tournaments, although there are some TOC tournaments that do not allow you to register as an independent debater. Something that I will keep in, something that you should definitely keep in mind though is that independent debaters would typically have to pay much more because their school usually will not cover any of the costs. And that could amount to, at the end of the year, like thousands of dollars in terms of, like expenses. So if you really don't have any option for your school debate team and just paying those expenses is not really feasible, then it's something that you should definitely take into account, like a very serious thing to consider. Sorry, I got muted. Yeah, so that's something that's very important to consider. I personally got pretty lucky because my school covers everything except for the cost of airplane tickets. So throughout my entire career, I only had to pay for plane tickets. And then in last year and a lot of this year where tournaments were basically all online, I didn't have to pay for anything. So it really is kind of just about luck at the end of the day, but there are ways to work around not having a debate team. Why I decided to do debate, I think that I kind of wanted to branch out of the general STEM focus that I had as a middle schooler. And I kind of wanted to learn about public speaking, generally just because public speaking is like an extremely important skill. And I was kind of a shy person in middle school. And I think there's like nothing worse in the world, like the feeling of being shy, something that's extremely kind of like not necessarily painful, maybe more annoying. Like wanting to speak up but not being able to because you're too scared. Wanting to, talk to people, maybe make a new friend, but you're not able to bring yourself to do it. I think that's something that I wanted to get over. And, doing debate really helped me get a lot of confidence, and kind of helped me craft those skills. I think that while it wasn't initially my motivation to do debate, some things that I have learned about debate as I've done it, maybe the benefits are things like college apps, for example, and not just college apps, but also work skills, like the ability to do interviews, things like that are all things you learn about debate. And then also just the content. If you're interested in politics, if you're interested in economics, if you're interested in philosophy, if you're interested in critical theory, all of these things are things that are covered in debate. It's a very, wide array of content that you can sort of learn about. And then the last question is, how did I manage time and extracurriculars in high school? So I'd say that while it seems like I did a lot of things in high school, I would say that in reality, most of my time was being spent on debate. And I say this because I basically learned math in 6th grade and beyond. And basically what was like sort of good about me learning math very early was that I kind of developed the foundation to become a USMO level math competitor very early on. So going into 9th grade, I basically had all the tools that I needed to qualify for the JMO. And then going into 10th grade, I didn't really have to study that much to qualify for USIMO. So math never really took up a significant portion of my time. And while I wasn't like a mopper or anything, I had like the solid foundation of math skills for me to have sort of an interest in math and debate. So what I'm sort of personally interested in is like using STEM solutions to humanities problems. Like for example, like AI solutions to things like climate change. You learn about climate change in debate, and you can sort of learn about AI when you do computer science. So those are things that I'm interested in. That's sort of why I was interested in doing both math and computer science, but then also debate in high school. So debate was sort of similar. I had already a foundation of debate going into high school through my sort of middle school learning. But I kind of just found time in my day to have debate practices and do a bit of debate work on my own. And this also just comes with like being ahead on your schoolwork. Like for example, if you have free time in class or if you have a free period, it's better to just knock your homework out of the way instead of procrastinating and doing it later. So then you can maybe have time for other things. So I would say that despite doing math, computer science, and debate, I still had a lot of time to do the things that I was personally interested in, like playing basketball, for example, or just like watching TV or playing video games, like all normal high schoolers. That's just comes with like very efficient time management, just staying ahead, staying on top of schoolwork. I will say that my schoolwork is a lot less intensive than a lot of public high schools, in which case it may not be the best idea to try to be competitive in debate, math, and computer science. Maybe like two things might be better. But the reason why I really picked up computer science my junior year is because of quarantine. I just had a lot more time, right? Usually I was used to driving 30 minutes to school and back. With quarantine, I just stayed at home and I had a lot more time on my hands. I decided why not just give a shot to computer science. So yeah, I would say that generally that is a reason why I had time to do computer science. Maybe with a typical public school schedule, it might not be the best idea to do that. But yeah, I would say that generally the best idea for managing time in extracurriculars is just stay on top of your work and make sure that you're not procrastinating. Those were all the very specific questions that I got ahead of time. So I think we can start. Yeah, we can start the Q&A session now.
All right, thank you, Jarvis. I think we have quite a few questions in the chat room. If you can just kind of go through them to see if you have addressed all of them.
Okay, yeah, I'll go through the chat room from the very top.
Yeah, so when Jarvis is looking at the chat room, let me just kind of comment on this very quickly, because some of the comments, some of the questions were related on how debate is related to interview and speaking and all that stuff. So I'll tell you my experience. So I have been interviewing graduating seniors for the past 15 years for college. And from what I have observed, it's a huge difference between kids, for example, a typical STEM kid who had never done any speaking training. It doesn't have to be debate, it's debate or, model UN or anything that requires a lot of talking, or compare a person like that to a student who have spent significant amount of time in high school. You can tell the difference right away. From the time they open their mouth, you can tell whether this person has been trained. If somebody have spent hundreds or even maybe over thousands of hours talking, and they are going to talk differently when they open their mouths, when they start talking, they're going to sound different than somebody who have been only focused on STEM, who have been doing math and coding for the entire high school career without talking much. It's a huge, huge difference. All right, sorry, Jarvis, I'm turning this back to you.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would say that debate really helped me a lot for the interview stages of college applications. And I'm also sure that it's going to be helpful for job interviews in the future or internship interviews. It's just because it really helps you think faster about what you want to say. It also helps with just total knowledge about the things that you can say. It's also always just an experience that you can talk about. So yeah, just talking for hours at debate tournaments, spending hours like trying to persuade your judge about something, crafting your own arguments. Those are all helpful, especially in interviews where usually you would speak slower. So the first question that I see is, if I don't live in the US, am I still able to compete in these formats? I think that it's definitely country dependent. There are going to be countries that have their own debate tournaments, in which case the circuits might be a little bit different and the debate events might be different as well, but it will definitely still be possible to compete in debate. As for not living in the US, there is still, like, international students are still able to compete at US tournaments. It just becomes a question of, is it, feasible or possible to travel to the US that frequently? But yeah, there are definitely countries that have debate tournaments. I would say that something that is also significant is that I'm pretty sure there's an international debate event known as World Schools. And every year, each country will select maybe 24 students to compete for their country in that international format. But yeah, the next is, what hard skills are needed to be at the top of debate? I would say that it gets very nitty gritty in terms of the different styles of debate. There are like skills where you just need to be knowledgeable about policy. You need to be knowledgeable about philosophy. So there's a lot of content-based knowledge that you need to have. I would say that some general skills is just the ability to critically think or the ability to generate arguments. So if you cannot generate arguments within your head at a very fast pace, then you will probably fall behind, especially if you're against an opponent that can generate arguments faster than you. The last thing I would say is you kind of just need to be clear, especially because in debate, you're speaking very fast. If you are not clear, it's very likely that a judge or opponent will miss something you said, and you never want that. So there's a lot of different clarity drills that people can practice. For example, a very common one is when you put a pen in your mouth and you try to read through your case as clear as possible with a pen in your mouth. And then doing just a few minutes of that, you'll be able to noticeably tell that your speaking gets more clear. Irene asked, what debate trainings have you participated in? Outside of just practicing with my team, I've gone to debate camp, Nsda and TDC. I've gone to both twice. So I went to Nsda and TDC my sophomore year and my junior year. Yeah, that was basically about it, aside from just practicing with my team. What are some tricks in top debating? I think I answered that above. The age and grade recommendation for debate camps. Typically, you want to be at the minimum 6th grade. There is no skill level required to attend debate camps. Every debate camp will have a lab for beginner debaters, but it's probably not a smart idea to send an elementary schooler to debate camp. But 6th grade might be a push, but it's definitely possible for 6th graders. And then 7th grade and 8th grade, both pretty common at debate camp. Chris asks, why are these camps so expensive? That's kind of just a sad part about debate, is that in order to receive hours and hours of instruction, they also have to pay instructors, thousands of dollars in order to dedicate that time, in which case camps are all going to be pretty expensive. I would say that the best alternative, there are some urban debate societies that can offer lower cost camps. There are some nonprofit organizations that may offer lower cost camps. And then also the Texas Debate Collective, which is a nonprofit organization, has a much lower price as compared to other camps. Do all debate videos help you? No, there are a lot of unhelpful debate videos on YouTube, but I would say that generally, if the debate video is from a reputable source like debate drills or victory briefs, chances are it will probably be helpful. Helen asks, what specific qualities do you think you have that make you a top debater? I think that my biggest skill as a debater is my strategy. In debate, there's oftentimes you're going to introduce multiple arguments into the debate. And within your last speeches, you're going to have to decide which arguments you want to commit to and which arguments do you kind of want to get rid of. And I think that choosing those arguments and being able to, go for specific arguments is what made me stand out as opposed to other debaters. Pam asks, to recite the cases and research materials, is it important to be a good debater? I think that kind of just comes with speaking. If you have a pre-written case, then you kind of just need to be a good speaker in order to, recite those cases. But what makes a good debater is when it comes to the rebuttal stage, where you have to make arguments against your opponent's speech and you have to defend your own cases. Layla asks, how much time did you put in prepping for each topic? Personally, I would probably, within like the first week of the topic coming out, I would just spend a few hours. Reading through articles, trying to get a better understanding of the topic. And then I would maybe cut a couple arguments. I'd maybe like write a few arguments. The thing is with a team, if you split up the work, it really isn't that much work at all. So it does not take that much time to prep for each topic. Joy asks, if I'm having trouble keeping a partner in PF, should I switch to LD? And what was your experience with PF? So personally, I only did PF in 6th grade, so it will be difficult for me to speak. It will be difficult for me to speak for a high school perspective. But I think that typically if you're having trouble finding or keeping a partner in PF, it's probably better to just do LD. And I think the reason for this is because generally in PF, if you don't have a partner that is as dedicated as you, it will typically be you that's doing all the work and you having to shoulder the burden of the entire team, which is never really desirable. At my school, we do have a PF team and they generally will switch around partners a lot, but they are all generally dedicated, which is why even though they switch around partners, those teams will still usually be successful. So if you are unable to find a partner that is as dedicated as you or as devoted to the activity, it would probably be better just to do LD. Helen asks, do I plan to continue debate while in college? As of right now, yes, but it's not a definite yes because the college debate event is parliamentary, which is very, very different from LD. So I might try it out first and then see if I like it and then see what happens from there. Yale does host an annual debate tournament for high schoolers every year though. And since they do offer LD in that, I will definitely try to be active in hosting that tournament. I just don't know if I'm still going to compete on the college circuit. Gabriel asks, does practicing always help you with debating? Or to put another way, what could be a good benefit or quality that can help me with debate? I think that practicing definitely does help you debate. Having self-awareness to sort of understand what you need to practice is definitely beneficial because even if you're practicing by yourself, you can still consciously get better at those skills. Generally, just having more experience in rounds and then understanding what you did wrong and what you did right will gradually make you better. And then just after having 10 practice rounds, a lot of people will notice that suddenly they're a lot better than before they had those practice rounds. Gabriel asks, do you have to travel to do debate? It's definitely probably a necessity or a strong recommendation for people that want to be successful on the TOC circuit. And the reason is there probably aren't very many TOC tournaments that you can travel to that's not via plane. So for Texas, maybe there would be like 4 or 5 TOC tournaments in Dallas, Houston, and Austin combined. I believe there are 2 or 3 tournaments in Dallas. There's 1 tournament in Austin, and that's at UT Austin. And then there's probably 2 in Houston, which is at UH and at Strake Jesuit. So if you want the most opportunities to get TOC bids, then you probably would have to travel. But if you're not interested in the TOC circuit and you're only interested in local debate or an Nsda nationals, then you most likely would not have to travel. Ryan asked the question, you may have mentioned this earlier. When did you decide to invest so much time into tournaments and travel time into debate? Did you give up any other commitments or decide to take a class with lighter course load to better balance debate? I would say that I didn't give up much. The one thing that I did give up was basketball and football, which I played basketball and football in middle school. I didn't feel bad about giving it up because I think that even if I didn't do debate, I might have just have not done basketball and football in high school. I might have done football, but with the schedule and debate, it was pretty much impossible to commit myself to like a varsity sport. I would say that I really didn't have to give up anything else. Maybe like student council, but I wasn't really interested in student council anyways. So I was still able to do a lot of things that I wanted. I just had to manage my time properly. It's not like you're really traveling every weekend for debate. There's still tons of free weekends. It's just that you'd have to give up a lot of weekends. Gary asked which day is usually the tournament of debate and how many rounds usually. So I would say that for local tournaments, it's typically either Friday, Saturday or Saturday, Sunday. That's because the local tournaments will usually only have 3 to 4 rounds, and then they would move into elimination rounds. For TOC tournaments, which are usually longer, it would probably be 3 days. So either Friday through Sunday or Saturday through Monday. And usually they would have 6 preliminary rounds, and then they would move into elimination rounds. And elimination rounds will usually start at either double octafinals, which is top 32, or partial triples, which is either from 32 to 64. So yeah, the TOC tournaments will typically have a lot more rounds than local tournaments. Jason asks, if my school doesn't offer LD anymore, but I did okay in middle school, what debate should I switch into? It depends on what school you're going to, in terms of like what debate they offer. But typically, if you did well in LD, then a transition to PF or policy, or even other debate-ish events, kind of like Congress, is probably still very possible. Gabriel asks, if my school offers PF, but I like LD, how do I solve it? At that point, you kind of just have to consider, is it worth it trying to do LD by myself? Or is it better to do PF and deal with, like me not liking it a ton? I would say that you kind of have to get a feel for it yourself. If you just like really, really despise LD, you can try to do it as an independent, but I would say that if you like LD, then chances are you're also going to like PF. Maybe not as much as LD, but you probably are not going to hate it. Does it matter if you use LD in a slow debate? I would say that typically LD is much more fast-paced, especially at the TOC level. You will see people speaking at 400 words per minute. So if you want to be competitive at the TOC level, you're going to have to work on being faster. May asks, my kids are shy in general and don't like to speak in public. What can I do to convince them to try debate or public speaking? I would sort of just say, I wasn't extremely enthusiastic about doing debate at first, but I kind of just saw it as something that I, should probably try out. So I would start with that approach. Just ask them to try it out. Maybe sign them up for a class, and if they don't like it within the first few weeks, maybe drop it. You'd also maybe try to use the approach of like a reward or an award or something if they do well in debate or public speaking. But I would say that generally just tell them to try and try to convince them about the benefits of debate, just like why it's generally just something that's a very valuable tool, and why it's better to sort of get over your shyness. Jennifer asks, can you give some good resources for preparing USICO Golds or Platinum? I would say that typically, like what got me into Gold was classes at Momentum Learning. So I started off with USICO classes at Momentum Learning, and that is how I learned the fundamentals and a lot of useful tools for USICO. There are also textbooks online. I know there's the Competitive Programming Initiative, which offers free classes for USICO Platinum. You can also use the USICO website itself and do past USICO problems. And then typically that practice will be good enough to get someone into Platinum. Pam asks if debate helps with writing skills. I think it definitely does, because debate in general helps with your speech articulation. It helps with rhetoric and understanding which words to use. And that would usually translate into writing skills as well. So I found that my participation in debate has also helped a lot, in writing like English essays and things like that. Gabriel asked, did you work on debate during college, or how much did you practice in college? I'm actually not in college yet, but I'd say that in college, I'm probably not going to be as committed to debate. My commitment to debate will probably be on the coaching side, in which case it will probably be not as focused on the college circuit, but rather still the high school circuit and coaching high schoolers. Also, yeah, I want to second that we will have a seminar about USICO tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central. So you could probably get more detailed answers about USICO there, because I believe it is Daniel, who is a two-time USICO camper, who will be able to help you with that. Gabriel asks, does math and science help you improve on debate and public speaking? I don't think it necessarily helps each other. I would say that there's definitely like a link between math and science, because the problems that we often talk about in debate can have like mathematical or scientific solutions, maybe not in the debate round itself, but as just a general interest. So I think we are running out of time now, but if you have any more questions or a question that I did not answer, my email is on the screen, as is my number. So please feel free to email me or text me.
I know we're running a little late. So if for those who want to stay, we can probably get a few more questions. If Jarvis has not addressed your question, you can just probably unmute yourself and just speak up. All right, any questions?
I have a question. It just mentioned you say resources. One is momentum learning. The other resources, we missed the can you share that one more time?
Oh yeah. So there is a nonprofit organization called the Competitive Programming Initiative, which offers low cost classes for students that want to learn programming up to the platinum level. There's also the USICO guide, which I believe has free lessons for every level of USICO. And then finally, just the USICO website itself. The USICO website will have all of its past problems and past solutions, which will basically be very helpful, just in terms of doing practice. And then finally, I think there are some free online textbooks that will just like cover a lot of like general topics and techniques that you need for all levels of USICO.
All right, thank you so much.
I have a question here. Just based on your experience, do you see the kids who have to get involved with the varsity sports, will that be a big challenge to do debate?
I think it definitely depends on the season of the sport. So for example, for football and basketball season, those seasons will typically be in the fall and the winter, and those will typically correspond to the debate season as well, which makes it very hard for you to go to football practice as well as debate practice. There are other sports though, maybe like swimming or maybe like rugby or track and field or cross country, where the seasons may not intersect with the debate season as much, and then it may be easier to do those. So for example, I know a debater in Massachusetts. He is a rising senior who's very successful in debate, but he is also #1 in Massachusetts in several boys track events. So he's found it possible to do a varsity sport and debate at the same time. So it's not impossible at all. It just really depends on what time you're doing the sport and what time you're debating.
Sorry, maybe I missed that part. So for the debate, major season is fall and winter?
Fall and winter, and then usually early spring. So typically there would be tournaments starting in September, And then by the end of February, most tournaments are over, but there are still some tournaments in the early spring.
Got
Hi,
it.
Travis.
Thank
I
you.
have a quick question. For the Lincoln Douglas, you as a single person team, you do not have a teammate, right?
In the round itself, you are debating by yourself, but before the round, you may have a coach, you may have teammates who can help you. It's just that in the round, you're debating by yourself.
I have a question. So about the Lincoln Douglas debate, how do you build up your philosophy knowledge? So is that from a school lesson or you read? Yeah.
It's typically having a coach who is knowledgeable about philosophy is very helpful. But you can also read previous cases that are philosophy oriented. So learning about philosophy that way is also helpful. There's also several websites where you can just learn about philosophy or read through philosophy. So for example, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is something that's very useful. And just it's very useful for just learning a bunch of different philosophy terms or philosophy concepts that you may then talk about within a debate.
Thank you.
Hello?
Can I have another question?
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah. So I have another question. So based off my experience in debate, I'm currently in middle school. So I've seen lots of people reading very fast and spreading. So I'd like to hear your opinion on like spreading in general, because in our current school, we're like taught not to do this. However, I'd like to like know your opinion as well.
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know, spreading is short for speed reading. And in LD debate and also policy, you will often find people reading arguments very, very fast. Basically, as opposed to middle school debate, in middle school debate, people are not told to spread. It is sort of looked down upon. And even in high school local circuits, it's usually uncommon to see people spreading. But in the TOC circuit, it is extremely common to see people spreading. Spreading is basically widely accepted as something that you should do. Personally, I don't have much thoughts on spreading. I think that there's some good parts about spreading. I think there's also bad parts about spreading, but I think that it's kind of inevitable in terms of the fact that judges accept spreading, everyone spreads. So you kind of just have to learn it. It's not horrible. And also it can be more educational because the faster you read, as long as you're able to hear well, you are able to also get more arguments into the round and also able to, and then having more arguments will open more avenues for being strategic and finding ways to win.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I have a question. If my children is not available on each Saturday during the school year, September to the next year's end of May, can I still possible to join in the debate team? Thank you.
If they are strictly unavailable every Saturday, no matter what, then it would probably be pretty difficult to do debate just because every tournament is going to be on a weekend. You will probably never find a tournament that's on a weekday. That's just because, you know, most students are free on the weekends and not weekdays.
Thank you.
How do you practice responding to an argument from your opponent in the middle of a round?
I think that just comes down to like really quick thinking. Just having like strong argumentation skills and having better understanding of the topic is probably what is most beneficial in terms of responding on the spot. And that just comes with practice and experience. The more practice you do, the more rounds you have, the better able you are to do that. I also want to point out that you don't always have to respond right on the spot because usually you have 4 minutes of preparation time. You can use some of that time to just think of arguments, but I would say that generally the way to think faster, there's no specific way to do it. You just have to debate. You have to debate a lot you have to do a lot of practice, and then over time, the ability to do that will become enhanced.
Hi. You just mentioned about some useful books. Could you please let us know the titles of those books?
Yeah, I think there's one textbook that's just called Guide to Competitive Programming. You could probably Google it and it should show up. I'd say that is probably the one that I use the most.
So I have a question. So my son is doing congressional debate. How easy it is to switch to all the other three types you said, public forum, policy, or Lincoln Douglas?
So I would say that for LD, PF, and policy are probably the most similar. Congress is, at least in my experience, much different than both of them. Although there have been people who switched before, I would say the first thing you want to kind of decide is, are they interested in LD, PF, or policy, or do they want to stick to Congress? Because Congress is not really a bad event. It's just not as debate oriented as the other three. So if they do want to switch over eventually, then I would recommend to do it as soon as possible, just so they kind of don't get behind other students who are starting off in LD. It is totally possible though.
Sorry, when you were on the novice level, did you get started on the local circuit or did you go to Tournament of Champions immediately?
I started off in the local circuit. I kind of was in a unique situation where I went to Clemens High School in 9th grade, and then I transferred to Strake Jesuit in 10th grade. So in 9th grade, I basically only did local tournaments. And so yeah, I would start off as a novice, and then after a couple novice tournaments, I went to the varsity level, and then I qualified for state after I think like 5 or 6 tournaments, just from my experience in the novice level. So it's definitely possible to start in the novice level and then find success pretty immediately. I would say that my general advice is you want to get out of the novice level as soon as possible, because even if you don't do as well at varsity tournaments, you will learn much more in those rounds.
Thank you.
Any other
what would you
questions?
say are the main differences between parliamentary debate and Congress?
I personally don't know that much about parliamentary or Congress, but from what I've heard, I don't think that there are huge differences. I've heard that they're pretty similar. But yeah, I'm sorry that I don't know much more to be able to answer that question.
Jarvis, I want to ask you, which newspaper do you read most often? So I know some kids read like New York Times. So I just want to know which newspapers do you often read? Thank you.
So I say that there isn't really ever like one specific one that I read about. Usually what I read is dependent on the topic. So for example, if the topic is about nuclear weapons, maybe the first thing that I'll search up on Google is just the history of nuclear weapons, and then read whatever comes up. But I would say that generally like what has come up the most is probably the Washington Post, the New York Times. Yeah, I'd say those two probably come up the most, maybe Business Insider. And then Politico.com is also good for information about politics.
Okay, thank you.
Do you generally prefer flowing on paper or on a laptop?
I flow on laptop. And I think that's just because I'm a pretty fast typer and my handwriting is not that great, but it's extremely common for people to flow on paper. It really just comes down to personal preference, and whichever one kind of feels better for you.
Hey, Jarvis, when you applied to Yale, did you declare your major as math and economics?
I think it's different for every school, but for Yale specifically, they asked you which 3 majors are you most interested? I believe that's what they ask. I can pull up my application just to make sure.
But
But
you still can change, like if you want to change, you still can change at this point.
yeah, I think for Yale, you have to declare your major at the end of your 2nd year. So for 2 years, you can take classes and think about what major you want to do.
In your math and economics, do you have one is major, one is minor?
No, math and economics is actually a joint major, so it's just one major at Yale.
Oh, thank you.
So Jarvis, I saw a different question kind of related to this. How did you decide to go to Yale instead of, let's say, Wharton?
I think that the reason that I went to Yale over Wharton is that I think that Wharton is kind of like a much more competitive scene, which personally I don't really like, as opposed to Yale, which I think is much more relaxing. Not relaxing in the sense that you don't have to do work, but more relaxing in the sense that you can kind of decide what you want to do, not too ahead of time, but kind of just take time to learn about what you want to do, and then also do the things that you're interested in. I think another reason is that I wanted to go into business, but also go into the more quantitative or mathematical side of business. I think that Wharton is not super strong in those fields, such as quantitative analysis or financial technology. I say that they're more strong in fields like consulting and investment banking. Whereas at Yale, I would really have like the flexibility to learn business and economics and finance, but also be able to learn more about like the STEM interest that I had while only doing one major. Because since math and economics is only one major, my course load and my workload is not going to be as high, which gives me more time to do the extracurriculars I want to do and take some time to explore my own interests outside of academics. As for Wharton, if I wanted to do math or computer science, I would have to do a double major on top of all the Wharton curriculum, which has a ton of just regular business classes that usually are not going to be that useful.
You are running out of time. It's 8:23. So thank you guys so much for attending. Jarvis, thank you. I think you have done a great job. I'm sure everybody has benefited quite a bit from your talk. And thank you all for attending.